Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the mid-May book catch-up. I finished 6 books altogether so far in this month. Not in this month, up until this date, which is May 17th, I think. And I already talked about 3 books in the first video, which was like half an hour because I sort of talked about, on average 10 minutes per book. Yeah, because I had a lot of things to say about those books. So I'm going to talk about the other 3 books that I finished. And so I'm going to talk about this one first. This is Matt Haig's How to Stop Time. I actually got this book from my aunt's house because she happened to have this book lying around at her house. And this is not the kind of book that I usually read, but I thought, hey, let's just expand my reading horizon, shall we? So, yeah, I gave this a try, and I ended up giving it like 3 out of 5 stars. I thought, okay, before I said what I thought about this book, let's just talk about what this book was about. So this book is about this man who is named Tom Hazard, and he is about 400 plus years old, and apparently he has this condition in which he just ages much slower compared to normal people, whom in this book is termed as mayfly, while those who have this condition is sort of called anigeria in this book, and those who have this condition are sort of labeled as albatross because albatrosses live a long life apparently. And so Tom Hazard has been living for 400 years, more than 400 years. He is born sometime in the 17th century, I think, in France, and because of his sort of like strange lifespan, he and his family has been subjected to various kinds of persecution by people who thinks of them as unnatural, devil spawn, and he has been seeing violence happening to him and his family, and it really sort of scarred him in a way. And most of the story takes place in the present time, in which he works as a history teacher in London, but we also see his adventures in France, some part of his adventures in Tahiti, and in different kinds of places, also in New York, I think, throughout his 400 years of life. One thing apparently that he cannot do is to fall in love, and I'm not going to talk about why that is, but yeah, he can't fall in love basically in his life. His mission in this book is to find his long-lost daughter, who apparently also has that condition, and because he wants to do that, he sort of attaches himself to this shadowy society called Albatross Society, headed by this albatross, also long-lived like him, much longer than him, called Hendrich. And basically he has to do what Hendrich asked him to do. And some of the assignments that he has to do aren't exactly really savory assignments. So overall, I thought that this book feels kind of cheesy. It has a lot of moments in which the writing just seems to want to make you feel certain ways, almost kind of like emotionally manipulative. Although I wouldn't go so far as saying that it is very emotionally manipulative. Maybe I I don't know, maybe like I said in my last video, I have a heart and soul that I feel like I could distance myself from the sappy moments of this book, but there are certainly parts in which this book just sort of feel kind of sappy, and it's cheesy, and it would get sort of philosophical about the meaning of life and happiness, and yeah, it sort of has a good opportunity for it to go into that kind of kind of place, because it has a character that has a long life. So of course this character would start to philosophize. That aspect did not jibe well with me for obvious reasons. And the cheesiness is also not the kind of cheesiness I like. I mean, I like cheese in books, but this is not the kind of cheesiness that I go for, because it feels sort of sincerely cheesy in that way, and not in a more self-aware, almost parody, self-deprecating kind of cheesiness, which is more of my taste, to be honest. That being said, this book is a quick and easy read, and it has about 300 plus pages, and I was able to finish this book quite quickly, which is a bit of an achievement for me, because for a book that has 300 plus pages, I usually can't read, very quickly like I did with this book, which was less than 1 week. So that was the plus side of this book. But yeah, overall it's just it's a really cheesy book. Maybe if you want to read something that is quick and fun and light, you can go for this book. I wouldn't say that this book is bad. It's just not exactly something that aligns with my taste. So next, I finished this book, which I expected to align more with my taste. And this is The Discomfort of Evening by Marieke Lucas Rijneveld. This one was originally written in the Dutch language, and it was translated into English by Michele Hutchison. This book is about this young girl who lives in this Dutch village with her family. It is near Christmas, and this Dutch girl, her name is Jas in this book, although I suspect that that's probably not her real name. It sort of has a symbolic meaning, considering what Jas means in Dutch. It means coat, and there's a girl wearing a coat, on the cover, so it is symbolic. So Jas is quite worried that her pet rabbit is going to be turned into Christmas dinner. So innocently she starts to pray that instead of her rabbit, maybe God will take her brother instead. And turns out, before Christmas, her brother dies in a skating accident. And because of this, Jas is sort of become somewhat conflicted internally, because she starts to feel this kind of guilt in her that maybe there is a possibility that she is the cause of her brother's death, but she is also unable to really understand, like, logically, how is that so. At the same time, her family, especially her parents, are also dealing with her brother's death in their own ways that are particularly unhealthy to themselves and also to their children as well. And because of that, their family is slowly crumbling because of how the family is coping with the brother's death. This book is mainly about Yas, and she narrates this entire book. It's mainly about how she is coping with her own guilt, but at the same time how she's coping with the way her parents are acting, the way her siblings are acting, and she starts to have different kinds of imagery. She starts to wonder about certain aspects of life, like religion and especially death, and what is happening to her body as well. She starts to experience constipation as a result, which is something that she sort of subconsciously does in response to everything that is happening around her. The atmosphere of this book is really cold, and which makes sense because the story takes place sometime in the winter, and so it is very cold, and you can certainly feel that. I think that that is something that the book does really well. The atmosphere is portrayed really well in this book. You can certainly feel the oppressiveness of the cold, the discomfort that the whole thing just feels sort of awkward and heavy, and people are just being destructive to themselves and to others. People are not the family members are not communicating really well in this book with each other. They don't even want to talk openly about the death of one of the parents don't even want to talk about the death of one of their sons. And on top of that, the parents are also highly religious, and those things just all sort of gets mixed up into with each other, and they become this kind of like really toxic environment for the kids to grow up in, and they end up doing things that kids are not supposed to be doing, which is spoilery. Not gonna tell you guys, you're gonna have to read it for yourself, but the kids definitely start to do things that aren't exactly recommended for kids. This book is actually quite known for its depiction of very graphic depiction of human bodily fluids, excreta, and on top of that, also some sexual things in this book as well. Dead animals feature prominently in this book, which I thought was interesting. All of those things are quite interesting, especially when you want to tell a story that deals with grief and loss. But I just thought that with this book, it just got a little bit overboard. Certain mentions of bodily fluids and dead animals just felt like they were just there to be mentioned. They're just there to shock you. And they just didn't really serve the story, the characterization in this like super meaningful way. They don't really add on top of it. There are certain aspects of human excreta which I think really helps with the story, particularly Yas's experience with constipation. That helps. I think only someone who is a poet like the author could think of something like that, which I think is honestly quite beautiful. I mean, it's constipation, bowel movements, but I think in the context of the story that is beautiful, the way that it's related, and also what happens to the certain farm animals in this book later in this book is also quite beautiful. I mean, it's a horrible thing that happened, but again, in the context of this book, it's beautiful. But the other mentions of animal deaths and bodily fluids, it's just redundant, and it doesn't contribute much. It doesn't feel impactful. So it sort of made this book feel a bit like a slog to get into if you feel uncomfortable by those things, maybe you would like to avoid this book because they can get quite graphic. If you are uncomfortable with sexual assault, you may want to reconsider as well reading this book. Avoiding this book, because those aspects are also very vividly portrayed in this book. I would say certain parts of this book were quite nicely done, but I think it could probably need a little bit of trimming here and there. So yeah, that's The Discomfort of Evening, the 6th book that I finished in one day. I'm still a sluggish reader, by the way. I just resigned, so I could do this. This is The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. First of all, look at this beautiful Virago Modern Classics edition that I have. I have a bunch of these already so far. Probably gonna show you sometime later, who knows, but yeah, this is really beautiful, designed by artist Yerin Tong. And back to this book. This is a very slim book, so of course I was able to finish it in one day. Some people could probably finish this book in 1 hour, so yeah, still a sluggish reader. Anyway, this book was published in 1918, and The Return of the Soldier is about the return of a soldier called Chris Baldry, Captain Chris Baldry, to his opulent Baldry court, where his wife Kitty and his cousin Jenny are waiting for him. It's a bit of a surprise return because the war is not over yet, but Captain Chris Baldry, or Chris, he returns because he has a case of shell shock, and with this shell shock also comes loss of memory, where he literally forgets about everything that has happened to his life for the past 15 years. So while Kitty the wife, is happy that he's finally home, she also has another bad news because Chris can't remember her or their marriage. Instead, Chris is pining for his flame 15 years before, named Margaret, who is now a married woman and also, surprise, surprise, a low-class woman. Something that sounds really dreadful to Kitty. So this story is about how Kitty, Margaret, and Jenny are trying to deal with the return of Chris to their home, and also his memory loss and what it means to their life, how they're trying to reconcile it with everything that has been happening with the marriage and all that, and what they, or rather one character, ends up doing later to sort of resolve things for Chris. So it does feel kind of dramatic. I mean, there are not many things that are more dramatic than amnesia. I mean, that is sort of what happens a lot in soap opera. A lot of drama in here, but they don't feel melodramatic, so there's definitely that. Rather, I think it's a very wonderful and I would say sort of honest portrayal of what happens when someone just arrives and then they don't have that they don't have the recollection of the most recent years, and they are living in this sort of illusion, so to speak, because they don't know the truth of their of the present time, the truth about the situation of the present time. And they sort of live in this bubble of happiness and what it means to be living in that bubble versus to live beyond it. So it kind of gets in a somewhat philosophical mood at times. This book is surprisingly a book that explores social differences, social class, and I thought it is done in this like really nice way. And indirectly, it is sort of like a critique on the upper class at that time, especially in regards to their complacency, the feeling of the sense of security that they have, the stuffiness, the vapidity, the shallowness of life that they have, especially in regards to the war that is happening at that time, and how it feels like they don't experience the effects of the war. They are sheltered from the war, and so this book is sort of like a critique of that as well. And so I find that to be really interesting. For a very slim book, it packs a punch. It talks about many things, and also about how the issue surrounding with the loss of memory is sort of resolved at the end of this book. I thought that was interesting. It sort of demonstrates a lot of, I would say, character development, especially with characters. Certain character has to make a choice. I thought that was wonderful, and the more I think about this book, the more things that I seem to be able to sort of discover from this book. So yeah, this is another book that sort of becomes that sort of feels better and better after you finish it. I must admit, when I finished this book, I was tired. The writing in this book is flowery. So even though it's a small book, this is not a good choice if you are in a reading slump. Reading this book would probably make you feel tired if you are sort of slumpy. I felt tired after finishing this book, and so I was like, okay, I just wanted to go to sleep. But after that, I just thought more about it. It got me thinking more. So yeah, another wonderful book, highly recommended. This is my first Rebecca West, and I would certainly be trying more of her works in the future. So those are all the books that I have finished so far in the month of May, and yeah, I guess I'll be seeing you guys again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching. If you have anything to say, anything you want to comment about these books, feel free to comment down below. So I'm back with call to action. Anyway, I'll see you again. Bye bye.